Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com, and in this video we're going to talk about what you need to install to get started with JavaScript and Node.js. So installation instructions are not really my thing, and they're going to vary from operating system to operating system. So my aim is here to give you enough information that you know what to install, even if you have to look up installation instructions for your particular system. So if you've already been programming for a while, this will be easy for you. If you're a complete beginner, you might have to do a bit of Googling, a bit of searching on the internet. So the first thing that we need is we need some kind of terminal where we can write commands. So if you're using Mac, by default, Mac has this program called Terminal, and you just start it up, and the language of the terminal is what we call Bash, and I can highly recommend Bash. So if you have a Mac, you can just start up a Bash terminal. It's just there already. If you're using Linux, then you probably know what you're doing with terminals anyway, and you probably also have a Bash terminal available to you. If you're using Windows, it's possible that you're more of a beginner, and then you need to look up some instructions. Now, there are two different things you could do here for Windows. One is to use the typical Windows console, but the other is you could install or enable a Bash terminal for Windows, because Bash is just so much nicer and more powerful than what's been coming with Windows over the year. In Windows 10, there is, I believe, a Bash shell. We call it a Bash shell included with it. You've simply got to enable it. So if you just search for Windows 10 Bash shell, you'll find instructions for doing that. If you're using some other versions of Windows, another possibility is there is this Git Bash. Let's Google Git Bash. Git for Windows. So you can download and install that, and that gives you, I believe, a basic Bash shell that you probably can use for this tutorial. You probably won't need that, but it's another possibility. Now, once you've decided on what terminal you're going to use, whether it's Bash or a Windows console or whatever it is, you need some software that you need to be able to run within the terminal. Specifically, we need to install Node.js. So if you search for Node.js, you can find an installation package or program for your platform pretty easily. Just download it and install it. And we need to get to the point where we can type two commands. We can type node, let's type node-v actually. We can type node-v in the terminal, and instead of saying command not found, it actually returns a version number. So the -v says return the version number. We also want a command npm-v, which should also work, should also return a version number. That's the point that you want to get to, where you can type these two commands in your terminal and they give you version numbers. So probably just installing them is generally enough. If you have any problems, don't be afraid to search for your operating system and something like install Node.js. That's what we're really talking about here, a technology called Node.js Windows. For example, you search for that, you can find detailed instructions, various pages on exactly how to install it. You could also search for things like install Node.js Windows Bash, or whatever your operating system is, or whatever terminal shell language that you intend to use. But Bash is a good choice. And again, you can find instructions. Once you've got to the point where you can open a terminal of some kind, and you can type node and npm, and it does something rather than saying command not found, then that's it, you've got it installed. Okay, so we're also going to need an editor. We need a programmer's text editor, and the one that I'm going to be using is called Visual Studio Code. Now, Visual Studio is a massive, we call it an integrated development environment for, well, it's cross-platform, but it's a massive piece of software which I used to use. I haven't used it in ages. It is good, but if you want certain features, you have to pay for them. Visual Studio Code is a completely different thing, confusingly. I don't know, maybe Microsoft wanted to just help promote Visual Studio by calling it Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code has nothing discernibly to do with Visual Studio. Visual Studio Code is a lightweight, partly open source programmer's text editor. I highly recommend it. I definitely recommend installing this. So again, it's cross-platform. You can use it on Windows wherever you like. So that's Visual Studio Code. And if you search for that, you'll find it. You can just download it and install it. Finally, this is completely optional. It's not central to the course at all, but you might want to install Git. If you search for Git, not GitHub, hang on, Git, and you look at that, so this is git-scm.com, you can install this Git software. Now Git there's a version of Git integrated into Visual Studio Code anyway. You can use it from there, but the ideal thing is, if you want to follow along exactly with what I'm going to do, including the Git bits, which are completely optional and nothing to do with JavaScript, then you want to get to the point where you can also type, let's try Git. Yeah, there's not an option -v, but Git, if you type that in your console, it should also do something rather than saying command not found. Just Git. It's called Git. And what that is, it's just a version control system. It enables you to store the code that you're creating and store different versions of it. And although it seems like an unnecessary extra thing, or it might seem like that if you're a complete beginner, it's so useful to be able to store your code in a way that you're not going to lose it, and store different versions of it. And so I'm going to actually create a video on next, I think, on how you're going to use Git in this course. So it's not a course on Git, but we are going to use Git. If you can't be bothered with that, really, I do recommend it, but if you really don't want to use it, it's fine. You can follow this course without using Git at all. Okay, I think that's it. So basically you need to install Node.js, you need to install Visual Studio Code, and ideally store Git as well. And you need a terminal, so you need to be able to go to a terminal, and at the very least you need to be able to type node-v npm-v, and they need to do something. You might need to Google for instructions on how to get those working. Ideally you should get Git working there as well, and you'll have Visual Studio Code as your editor, and I think that's it. So if you can install all that lot one way or another, don't give up. If you're a complete beginner, believe me, it's not that difficult. You'll just need to find instructions, and ideally a bash terminal, but you can use Windows console as well. Okay, so until next time, happy coding. In this video, we're going to do something that's completely optional. You don't need it to follow the course, but it's a really good thing if you do it. And that is, we're going to set up a Git repository on GitHub, and that's going to be where we're going to store our code. So if you go to github.com, so GitHub is when you go to it, you're going to see something different to this. I've already created an account on there, but let's maybe see if I can just log out so I can see something more like what you'll see when you go to it. So you'll see this. Create a free account on there. Now, what is this? Well, we're going to use version control software called Git. You don't have to follow this course, but I am going to. Git stores your code somewhere. It's going to store it in what we call a remote repository. And github.com allows you to create remote repositories for free. So you can store your code, and you can either make it public or keep it private completely for free, at least at the time I'm making this tutorial. So create a free account on there and sign into it. And then you're going to want to create a new repository. So your screen might look different to mine when you sign into Git, because I've been using this for quite a while, as you can see. But somewhere you'll find a button to create a new repository, and you need to click that. Okay, you need to give it a name. So I'm going to call this Node.js, I think. That will probably do the trick. Why not? Yeah. And you can type a description of it if you want. Source code for JavaScript and Node.js for beginners course. Up to you what you put. You can choose to make it public or private. If you're embarrassed about people seeing your code, you might want to make it private. I'm going to make mine public so that you can look at my source code examples here. You can add a README file if you want. That's always a good thing to do. I'm going to tick to say, yes, I want a README file in there. You can always add it later. And then there's this gitignore file. And what this is, it's a file that contains lists of files that are going to be present in the directory that you're working in, but you don't want to store them in your source code repository. And there are various standard gitignore files that we can use here. I don't know if there is one for JavaScript. Nah, I don't know. I thought there was actually. Yeah, there's one for Node, look. So if you search for Node and select that, that's a good one. License, you can change that as well. I'll use the MIT license, which as far as I understand means anyone can use my source code for anything. I'm not sure if they even have to attribute me, but I don't care here. You can use my source code for this course as you see fit. And then when you've done all that and decided on all that, just click Create Repository. And this doesn't usually take long. Here we go. So this is a source code repository which we're going to check code into as we go along. Now I'm going to click this clone or download button, and I'm going to just copy this this URL here, and I'm going to go to my terminal. Now we can actually do this, I believe, from within Visual Studio Code. I haven't looked up how to do that, but to do what I'm about to do, you don't have to use the command line. You can use a variety of tools that, you know, Git user interfaces, but I'm just going to do it on the command line. Here I'm using a bash terminal. So if you're using a Windows console instead, you want to probably spend just a little bit of time just checking how to use that sort of basic usage of it. The Windows console by default will tell you where you are. It says like C:/ whatever. It tells you where you are in the directory structure, and you're going to need to just understand the directory structure thing to follow this course, you know, but that's just basic sort of computing. If you've played with a computer for a while, you'll know what a directory is and so on. Okay, so in Bash though, it may or may not show you where you are by default. You can find out by doing pwd. So if you are using Bash, you can type pwd and it'll tell you where you're located in the directory structure. To change directories in Bash, I think it's the same in Windows. You just do cd space and the directory that you want to change into. You always need that space in Bash though. I think Windows lets you do cd ... to go to the directory above, but that doesn't work in Bash. You need cd space ... Pretty similar, really. That's change directory. So if you play with that for a bit, you'll get used to it. So I can go to the directory above. In Windows, I do dir, if I remember rightly, to see what's in here. In a Bash terminal, I can do, whether it's on Windows or not, I can do ls, shows me where I am, and I'm just going to change into this directory here. On Bash, usually you can use tab as well to auto-complete directory or file names. All right. So anyway, I'm in a directory where I want to put my work, and I've got Git working in here, so I can use Git. If I type Git, it actually does something, and I want to do Git clone, and then paste in that URL, hit return, and this is going to take my remote repository and basically create a local version of it. So if I do ls now, or dir, I suppose it will be in Windows console. Now I can see that it's created this Node.js directory. It's called Node.js because that's what I just called it on github.com when I created that repository. I can cd into this, change directory, and do ls or dir or whatever, and you can see what files are in it at the moment. This is where I'm going to be creating my source code. So we'll create source code in the next video, I think, and we'll also look at how to check it into Git. Okay, so until next time, happy coding.